What if I told you that 2 daughters once looked their father in the eye, and then made a decision so shameful, so unthinkable, that the earth itself seemed to hold its breath? What if I told you it wasn't lust that drove them, but fear and the belief that they were the last humans on earth? This is not just a story of sin, it is a story of survival, madness, and the curse that followed for generations. Lot had lost everything: his wife, his home, and his peace. The city he called home was gone, swallowed by fire from heaven. Sodom and Gomorrah had danced too long with sin, and God had judged them. Fire rained down like molten rain. The ground burned. People screamed. The heavens thundered with God's fury. But Lot ran. He ran with trembling hands, clutching the hands of his daughters. Behind him, his wife, curious, disobedient, and slow to leave sin, looked back. One look. That's all it took. Her body froze and turned to salt. Not a metaphor. A pillar. A monument to rebellion. Now, Lot and his daughters were the last survivors of a world turned to ash. They reached Zoar, a small town spared from destruction. But Lot was afraid. Maybe he feared the people. Maybe he feared God's wrath wasn't done. Maybe the echo of screams from Sodom haunted his sleep. So he left Zoar. He climbed the mountains like a broken man, dragging his grief, his shame, and his daughters to a cold cave far from everyone. And in that dark place, a darker idea was born. The cave was silent. Too silent. No birds. No voices. No laughter. Just the sound of wind scraping against rock and firewood crackling in the night. Lot barely spoke. He stared. Sometimes he mumbled. Other times he wept. The once proud man who sat at the gates of Sodom now hunched in shadows, haunted by everything he'd seen and done. His daughters, the eldest and the younger, watched him. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. No sign of life. No other people. No men. No hope of marriage or children. The world had ended in their eyes. Were the last ones left, the eldest daughter whispered one night. "No one will marry us now," said the younger. In that moment, a seed of desperation took root. The eldest began to think not as a daughter, but as a survivor. "If our line dies with us," she said slowly, "then what was the point of our escape?" She remembered the stories. Of Noah and his family. Of starting over. Of desperate acts in desperate times. "We must give our father children," she said. "Even if it means doing something no one must ever know." Lot kept wine in the cave. Perhaps he used it to forget. Perhaps he never thought anyone else would touch it. That night, the eldest daughter poured a cup and gave it to him. "Drink, father. You need rest. You've mourned too long." Lot drank. And drank again. Soon his head slumped. His mind faded into silence. And he did not know when his eldest daughter lay with him. He did not feel the moment when shame crept into the cave wearing a daughter's face and called itself duty. In the morning, Lot woke with no memory. No guilt. No suspicion. But the daughter remembered. And the next night, the younger daughter said, "Let me go now." They repeated the act. Same wine. Same whispers. Same silence. And Lot knew nothing of it. Twice it happened. 2 nights. 2 daughters. 1 cave. And something stirred in both wombs. Time passed. The daughters grew heavy with child. Their bellies swelled as Lot grew more silent. Perhaps he suspected. Perhaps he never asked. Or maybe he chose blindness because the truth would have shattered him. The eldest daughter gave birth to a son. She named him Moab, which means from father. The younger also gave birth. She named her son Ben-Ammi, son of my people. 2 sons. 2 nations born from shadows. From Moab came the Moabites, a proud but rebellious people who would one day war with Israel and lead them into idolatry. From Ben-Ammi came the Ammonites, fierce, territorial, and often enemies of God's people. And the curse of the cave echoed for generations. Some say the daughters were wicked, that they lusted after their father and used the excuse of extinction to justify sin. Others say they were victims of fear and trauma, raised in Sodom, a place where right and wrong were blurred. Maybe they thought it was the end of the world. Maybe they genuinely believed they had no other choice. Lot, too, is a man tangled in contradiction. He protected strangers with the offer of his daughters. He escaped judgment, yet lived with guilt. He drank too deeply, fell too hard, and woke too late. But the Bible doesn't glorify this story. It tells it as it happened, raw, disturbing, and unfiltered. Not to celebrate it, but to warn. God did not speak during the cave incident. No fire fell. No angel appeared. No voice from heaven rebuked or corrected. But silence does not mean approval. God sees all, even the things done in darkness. Generations later, God would forbid the Moabites and Ammonites from entering his sanctuary for 10 generations, Deuteronomy 23 verse 3, because their descendants led Israel into sin. Yet, even in judgment, grace whispers. From the line of Moab came a woman named Ruth, a Moabitess who clung to God and became the great-grandmother of King David. And through David came Jesus Christ. So from the ashes of incest and despair, God brought redemption. Even the worst story, when handed to God, can find a thread of purpose. The story of Lot and his daughters is not one you tell children at bedtime. It's messy, disturbing, hard to understand. But it's in the Bible because real life is messy too. 1. Trauma distorts judgment. Lot's daughters weren't raised in holiness. They came from Sodom, a place where all boundaries were broken. Don't underestimate the influence of a sinful environment. 2. Fear leads to compromise. The daughters feared extinction. But instead of trusting God, they took matters into their own hands. How often do we do the same? 3. Silence doesn't equal approval. Just because God didn't thunder down from heaven doesn't mean he was okay with what happened. 4. Your choices echo through generations. Moab and Ammon weren't just sons, they became nations. Decisions made in one moment can ripple through centuries. 5. God can redeem anything. Ruth, a Moabite, chose God. And through her came the Messiah. No matter how dark your past, God can bring light from it. Lot lived out his days in silence. The Bible never records his death. No final words. No redemption arc. Just a man whose last recorded act was unknowing incest. A tragic ending for a man once called righteous. But even in that shameful cave, God's plan was still moving. Because God's story isn't made of perfect people, it's made of broken ones. And sometimes, the cave you think is your end becomes the place where grace begins its quiet work. Now what do you think about the action of the daughters? Drop your answer in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next story, titled The Talking Donkey, the story of Balak and Balaam.